And so we meet again in this form. And I realize how much harder and how much more effort is actually required to be present in this form comparing to a physical presence, of course. Although on the surface it may appear to be actually easier, more convenient because we are at home, possibly still in our pajamas. And if we are, we can stay in bed, switch the cameras off. So on the surface, it may appear to be actually easier, but I know that it isn't that easy. And so for making this effort, I'd like to thank you. And we come in longing for connection and fellowship, searching for the divine in our confinements. And it seems like the running theme for past few weeks was deepening that belief that all times are holy and deepening the search for the divine in all places. It was sort of the emphasis on the kingdom within and the eternity now. So here we are, not amongst worship leaders. We often speak about holding the space for all. And even though we aren't together, we are still holding this space here. Holding the space to see a world in a grain of sand and heaven in a wildflower, to hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. This hour. In this hour. So in this hour, I want to introduce an idea that we started doing in Leeds about 3 weeks ago, and it took off really well. It's an idea of 5 smooth stones of spiritual resistance. And of course, those 5 smooth stones is a reference to chapter 17 of the first book of Samuel, to that well-known story of a gentle boy facing the armed giant, David facing Goliath. And especially to this verse, then David took his staff in his hand and chose 5 smooth stones from the stream and put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag. And with his sling, he approached the Philistine, Goliath. And by the way, of course, we need to bear in mind that every time we read something from scriptures, holy scriptures, we in fact read translations. And fun fact about translations is when I was reading that story of David and Goliath, I decided that it would be best if I read it in few different translations. So I read this story in few different versions of the English Bible, or the Bible in English. And then I thought, well, let's see what it says in my mother tongue, in Polish. And yeah, it was a big reminder to me that all translations are imperfect, because I think it's verse 42. In all the English versions, it usually says something along the lines that Goliath despised David because he was just a boy, handsome, healthy looking, glowing with health, something along those lines. Yet the most popular Polish version of the Bible, from the Millennium Bible, says that the giant despised him because, and I quote, he was young and on top of that a ginger. So remember, translations are never perfect, all right? And our 5 smooth stones. This is an idea that was introduced by James Luther Adams, 20th century American Unitarian minister and theologian. He said that liberal religious community also has the 5 smooth stones. And those 5 stones, which we pick from the stream, give us the sense of empowerment to face something seemingly much bigger and much stronger than us, individually and collectively as a community. And those 5 stones are gratitude, sorrow, self-acceptance, our community, and then the wider world. So today I want to introduce this practice. Like I said, we've started doing it in Leeds and it took off really well. And I will later ask those of you who wish to speak, of course, there's no obligation to speak, to name them. And we may overrun with time. If this does happen, then, please feel free to sleep out. Don't feel bad about it, although I'll try my best to stay within the hour. Just before the lockdown, for my own home chapel, we started using the phrase Mill Hill Chapel, spiritual resistance and soul's rest. Spiritual resistance for the challenges of our times that we could not see coming then as we came up with this slogan, but also a sense of rest. So I would like this hour to be as well our soul's rest. Our rest by that nourishing stream from which we draw the 5 smooth stones of empowerment and resistance, empowerment within our reach. And for that, I would like to turn also to the famous biblical beatitude and something which inspired me via Francis, via your biblical discussion group on Facebook, the group, something that I wasn't aware of before when I was reading the Sermon on the Mount. But I'm sure many of us at least have heard of the Beatitudes. I want to show them, however, from a little different perspective. And that image was so powerful to me that I decided just to share it because I think it's a fantastic take on them. You see, I always fell into the trap of thinking of the Beatitude as, just something nice to say when really you have nothing better to say. A biblical equivalent of the quotes posted on a cliche background on the internet. Something to say to people who are currently in a bad place, but it doesn't actually help them in any shape or form. Perhaps maybe even a little patronizing to an extent, all that. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are they who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. I can only imagine how I would have reacted if I was persecuted and someone came up to me and said, "Oh, blessed are you because yours is the kingdom of heaven." Yeah, thanks, mate, but you're not really helping. The problem here lies with the translation of this biblical text to which we are so used to. And as someone who is bilingual, I know very well that to translate is to give up some meaning. And from my experience, there are certain ideas that, in my opinion, are far better expressed in English than in Polish, and vice versa. Sometimes I find the fluidity of the Polish language helps me to convey some messages better than English, you see. And I found it quite frustrating at first when I started to translate some of the things that I've written into Polish language for the Polish Unitarians. Because to translate was to sacrifice a fraction of the meaning on one side and add something slightly different on the other side. So the core of the message stayed the same, yet there were some nuances that really changed how it felt because every word has a different dynamic to it, different feel, if you like. And likewise, Elias Chakur, retired now Archbishop of the Greco-Catholic Church who served in Nazareth and Galilee, writes that knowing Aramaic, the language of Jesus, has greatly enriched his understanding of Jesus' teachings. He reminds us that those biblical texts as we know them are merely translations, and we sometimes get the wrong impression. For example, we are accustomed to hearing beatitude expressed passively. Like I said, blessed are the poor in spirit, for example, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied, and so on. But then he writes that blessed is the translation of the word, and I'm probably going to absolutely butcher this pronunciation, Makaroi from Greek, used in the Greek New Testament. However, if we look further back into Aramaic, the original language in which these words would have been spoken, we find the original word used was Aramaic word ashrei, apparently from verb yashar. And ashrei does not have the passive quality to it at all. It means to set yourself on the right way, to stand up to something, to turn around, or to become righteous. And he writes pretty much what I was thinking before. He writes, how could I go to a persecuted young man in a refugee camp and say, blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted, or blessed are those who are persecuted for the sake of justice, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven? That man would revile me, saying that neither I nor my God know his plight. And he would be right. So when I understand the words in Aramaic, with much more active quality of the word ashrei, I translate them like this. Get up, go ahead, do something, move, you who are hungry and thirsty for justice, for you shall be justified. Get up, go ahead, do something, move, you peacemakers, for you shall be called children of God. To me, this reflects his words and teachings much more accurately. I can imagine him saying, get your hands dirty to build a human society for human beings. Otherwise, others will torture and murder the poor, the voiceless, and the powerless. These are, after all, not passive, borderline patronizing statements, but active, energetic, alive, going beyond despair. So with this idea in mind, I will shortly invite you to consider your 5 smooth stones of spiritual resistance. Not as something that will be granted to you, who knows when, perhaps, at the point in your life when you felt sorry for yourself for long enough, but as tools for your own empowerment that you yourself have to pick up from the stream. That are there within your reach, waiting for you to be ready to face your own Goliath. But before we open up this forum for a discussion, if you want to join, let us join together in our separation in some meditation, reflection, or prayer, each according to your own customs. I want to think about those 5 smooth stones as something we will need if we want to create the new normal. Once this lockdown and the time of isolation is over. And of course, I know that many of us struggle now. Many of us cannot wait to go back to normal and cringe at those statements often shared that we must never go back to normal. Well, I would love to go back to normal, but I don't think I have ever experienced the kind of normal I am longing for. Because this world of people working long hours, dreading to call in sick at work, putting up with exploitation of the poor, exploitation of the planet, bombing different countries, caging children on the borders, sinking migrant boats, that was never normal. It was normalized, yes, but that wasn't normal. So when I say that I would love to go back to normal, I have in mind a normal that I have never seen. The normal that is fit for the human soul. And I think that right now we are in that time in between. And I think it's fair to say that the initial shock of our lockdown, our separation is long gone now, and it starts easing off. And we now start thinking of the way forward, but that way forward isn't clear yet. So let us return to our breathing practice. Let us return to our breathing practice. And make yourself comfortable and simply notice your breath, but do not change anything. Simply turn your attention to this breath that has always been here with you, but the breath that you rarely notice. And know that this, what you are longing for, is within you. Just like this breath. Let us be still for a bit, dwell in silence and listen to silence. That silence, even in this format, doesn't have to be awkward or difficult. It can bring comfort and ease too. This silence is a stream from which we draw our stones. So let us be silent together, tuning in to that which lies at the center, tuning in to that which knows the way. When, near the end of the day, life has drained out of light, and it is too soon for the mind of night to have darkened things. No place looks like itself. Loss of outline makes everything look strangely in between, unsure of what has been or what might come. In this one light, even trees seem groundless. In a while it will be night, but nothing here seems to believe the relief of dark. You are in the time of the interim, where everything seems withheld. The path you took to get here has washed out. The way forward is still concealed from you. The old is not old enough to have died away. The new is still too young to be born. You cannot lay claim to anything in this place of dusk your eyes are blurred and there is no mirror. Everyone else has lost sight of your heart, and you can see nowhere to put your trust. You know you have to make your own way through. As far as you can, hold your confidence. Do not allow your confusion to squander this call which is loosening your roots in the false ground, that you might come free from all you had outgrown. What is being transfigured here is your mind, and it is difficult and slow to become new. The more faithfully you can endure here, the more refined your heart will become for your arrival in the new dawn. Amen. That was, of course, the one and only Father John O'Donoghue, and a blessing for the interim time. I would like to share a poem with you. This poem is, yet again, this is a translation, and I sometimes wonder what it actually sounded like in the original language. It's a poem by Anna Akhmatova. She's considered to be Russia's greatest modern poem. She was born at the end of 19th century and wrote her poetry through the early 20th and into the mid 20th century. She was persecuted for much of her life and was unable to publish her poetry during Stalin's years. And writing nothing down, she memorized all her work. And so a lot of it survived in people's conscious. And this poem is titled, Everything Has Been Plundered. Everything has been plundered, betrayed, sold out. The wing of black death has flashed. Everything has been devoured by starving anguish. Why then is it so bright? The fantastic woods near the town, wafts of the soft cherry blossom by day. At night, new constellations shine in the transparent depth of the sky of July. And how near the miraculous draws to the dirty huts. No one knows what it is, but for centuries we have longed for it. Anna Akhmatova. No one knows what it is, but for centuries we have longed for it. So now I would like to invite your participation, of course, if you wish, to talk about those 5 stones of spiritual resistance. And we're going to take them one by one. So just to remind you once again, it's gratitude, grief or sorrow, self-acceptance, our community, and the wider world. So let us start with gratitude. What small things am I grateful for? And actually, when I say small things, I'm reminded of a friend of mine, and she says that everything seems so big right now that even those small things actually turn out to be huge, or at least that's how they feel. And me personally, I sometimes feel like I need to be reminded of things that I should be grateful for. So I want to invite your participation here. If you wish to name something that you are grateful for, but don't worry if you would rather remain silent. Also, we can utilize the chat box here, because bear in mind this service is recorded. So if you are not feeling comfortable speaking, but still want to share it, perhaps you could utilize this chat box and just write. Sometimes it's easier to type than to say. something that is on your mind, what are the things we are grateful for?
Well, I'm grateful for my cats. They're a great source of comfort at the moment.
I'm actually grateful for the inspiration, Arek. I am going to shamelessly pinch that phrase, spiritual resistance, and use it for a history of the Doncaster church that I'm going to write. Because I've made the decision, I'm not going to try and smuggle history into worship anymore. I'm going to start writing history as history. Thank you.
I'm grateful for the house I'm living in and the space it allows me, which allows me proximity, but also space to myself. And I have not spent so much time sitting at a desk writing before lockdown. I've always written, but I only got the desk a couple of weeks before lockdown. And it's definitely come in handy. And I've also discovered myself as a letter or card writer. And it isn't that important if people write back to me. It's so much pleasure to do these cards and customize them to the individual. And that is because it makes me feel useful. But I also like your imagery you have used. But at the moment, as far as putting spiritual or any other kind of resistance, I feel like David with a broken sling.
Thanks. Thank you.
I'm grateful for everybody that is taking responsibility at the moment. There is so much to worry about. I'm grateful that I'm not in charge of anything or anyone, and I'm glad that there are people within our community and nationally and internationally that are stepping up and feeling that need to act now. I'm grateful it's not me making those decisions.
I'm feeling very grateful for the technologies that we have to connect us, and I'm including that, the Zoom that we're on now, the Facebook that will appear later, and also, as has been said, pen and paper. Fantastic technology. And for all the people who make all of these things work, the behind the scenes tech support, the people who are going out of their way to help other people learn new technologies, and the postal services and key workers who are keeping our shops open.
I find myself being grateful for small things like the bin men, or bin people. You don't think about things like that, but yeah, just people who do the small things that keep us going.
Hi, Christina Smith. I'm grateful for being able to attend church on Sunday as well as take church. So, because there's so many different services happening at different times, it means that I can attend church and take church as well. I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah, thank you, Christine. And yes, thank you, Doncaster Unitarians, for moving the time of the service to 3 o'clock, which enabled me to do today exactly what you've just said, Christina. So thanks for that. This was our first stone that we picked up from the stream. The second stone is perhaps more difficult to carry or more difficult to pick up. This is a stone of sorrow or grief. And you may well prefer to keep this stone of sorrow in your heart, but if you wish to share, then please feel free to do so. And know that your grief is held and respected. Often, when we think about grief or sorrow, we think about those most tragic, most difficult experiences. But actually, we can grieve for many small things, or perhaps the way our lives have changed in the recent weeks. So, this is our second stone of spiritual resistance that we need to pick up from the stream if we want to face the Goliath, stone of grief and sorrow.
So my grief and sorrow is also what I'm grateful for, and that I miss meeting with people in community. Spiritual community. I miss the energy that you get from that. I miss the fellowship. I miss the odd, conversations that happen over coffee at the end. I missed being with everybody at GA, even though we did do it virtually. I really missed that. I missed lots of opportunities to have quick conversations over coffee. So yeah, it is a sorrow, but it also has a grateful side for me.
Thank you. Yeah, them two quite often seem to be very closely intertwined, gratitude and sorrow. And quite often it's almost impossible to distinguish between the two because we can be missing something and at the same time be grateful for that we've had it in our lives at some point. So that was the second stone, grief and sorrow.
Right.
I can actually sort of reinforce what you've just said. I've recently talked to one of my mum's cousins, and she has, a year and a half ago, lost her husband, and she was married for 60 years. So that is an awful long time. But she has all this gratitude for the shared life. And she's also quite glad, that the man who was veering into quite severe dementia did not have to live through the present situation. There is also the sorrow of the loss and the loss of the close proximity. She said she was just so mad keen on being hugged by a man. I said I would lend her mine if mine was allowed to travel. And there is the grief, but also the gratitude expressed very clearly, I think.
Thank you for this.
Saying that we're all feeling sorrow for the lives that we know are being lost around the world and for the stress that's caused to people who are having to bear the brunt of it, like the people working in the NHS and the key workers and things. But on the other side of that is that personally I feel grateful for the lessons that this situation is teaching us.
Thank you all. Moving on to our third smooth stone, self-acceptance. And for this, I will not be asking you to share it, but to state with clarity in your own heart any failures that you'd like to overcome, or perhaps aspiration to do better. If we can recognize where we fall short and aspire to do better, that's the first step That is the most difficult journey, I think, from the mind to the heart. So let us just dwell a little in silence. Once again, this silence does not have to be awkward or uncomfortable. Dwelling on self-acceptance, stating with clarity in your own heart what it is that you are wrestling with, what it is that you would like to overcome. And so our pouch has now 3 stones in it. The 3 stones, the 3 self-centered stones, the ones that come from within, our own gratitude, our own sorrow, and our self-acceptance. The remaining 2 stones look outwards towards the community. The first is our own community, and the second is the wider world. So I want to invite you now to pick up the 4th stone, our community. Who from our own communities, and when I say our communities, I do not necessarily mean from the Doncaster Unitarians community, but from your own local communities, your families or your neighbors, or perhaps people from your work. Who should we raise up in celebration or in concern? Perhaps you've got a great news to share, or a concern about a person or a group of people from your own community that you'd like to bring to our attention.
We have a friend who's a GP, and she's normally very bright and bubbly all the time. But today on Facebook, she let the mask slip and wrote a long piece explaining or describing her experience of being a GP at the moment, how stressful it is, how overwhelmed she is, some of the terribly difficult decisions that she has to make. And then she goes home and she has 2 young children who are looking to her as well. And so I raise her up, and she's someone that I have a personal connection with, but I dare say she speaks for many, many people who are in their working lives, keeping the professional mask on, but inside are really feeling the brunt of this.
Thank you.
I'd like to hold up in my community somebody called Sue Smith. She's no relation to me, but she runs our local COVID-19 support group. So if anybody is isolating, they can get buddied up for somebody who will do their shopping and get their prescriptions, and the same for people who are shielding, and just basically cries for help, and volunteers sign up, and obviously people who need the help, and she's been doing this. And she's also the secretary of the food waste project that I volunteer for, that has moved from a food waste project to a non-referral food bank for people who are struggling. And she lost her mother a couple of weeks ago to COVID-19. And she is just amazing, and she has continued to do all the work that she does throughout everything, and I'd like to hold her up because she is just one of the angels at the moment. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'm thinking, of course, from our Unitarians in the Yorkshire community, the family of David Dawson, and also family of David Arthur from Wakefield, who recently passed away. I'm sure there are many competing claims on our mind, many competing prayers for people from our communities, all our families, the elderly, our neighbours. So let us hold them all up in celebration as well as in concern. And the fifth smooth stone, it's looking even further afield. It's the stone of the wider world. Asking the question if there is anything that you would like to bring to our attention from the wider world, perhaps something that wasn't mentioned in the news. It doesn't necessarily have to be a concern, it could be a celebration. And I want to, being in the position of privilege here to speak, I want to start obviously by wishing all our Muslim friends Eid Mubarak, who celebrate Eid in this weird circumstances, this bank holiday weekend.
I also had quite a lot of thoughts about my Muslim friends, and I lit sort of some candles and then photographed them, and then we sent WhatsApp to all the Muslims with Eid Mubarak on it. And I was really taken by something which happened in Berlin and ended up on my newsfeed on my smartphone, that the Christian churches opened up for the overspill of the mosques so that the mosques could observe social distancing. The Christian churches gave space so the Muslims could celebrate Eid Mubarak. If that is not something good out of something very bad, I don't know what. And I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Thank you.
Actually, everybody's been really very serious so far today. Might I be permitted a lighter moment of celebration, and even quite a flippant one? It's not only Eid today, it is Bob Dylan's 79th birthday. And since the subject is stones, can I remind everyone one of his biggest hits, one of his silliest songs, and the chorus is, well, I would not feel so all alone. Everybody must get stoned.
Thanks.
Arek, you've talked about spiritual resistance today and the world's problems. It's hard to think of that and not think of young people in Hong Kong who are showing enormous courage and creating who knows what. I feel a great anxiety about what comes next there, that there are people who are, and churches are very, very strong in Hong Kong as well, and they are divided over whether to join the protests or not. But I just hold them up today.
Thank you, Francis. These were our 5 smooth stones, and with them in a pouch, when we're ready, only when we're ready, we may try to approach our own personal Goliath. And I want to read a bit from a little reflection on those five stones of spiritual resistance. Wrote by James Luther Adams. Religious liberalism affirms the moral obligation towards the establishment of a just and loving community. It is this which makes the role of the prophet central and is indispensable in liberalism. We aspire to and should struggle for fairness and equality in the civic and social realm. We deny the immaculate conception of virtue and affirm the necessity of social incarnation. Social justice isn't just a spiritual virtue in itself, and it won't just happen by itself. The incarnation is true, not of Jesus exclusively, but people universally, and God everlastingly. Of course, that last was a paraphrased words of James Martineau. The words of blessing, benediction, or empowerment. Stand up, do something, move. Rise up, you poor in spirit, and yours will be the kingdom of heaven. Rise up, you who mourn, and you will be comforted. Rise up, you meek, and you will inherit the earth. Rise up, you who hunger and thirst for righteousness, and you shall be satisfied. Rise up, you merciful, and you will obtain mercy. Rise up, you pure of heart, and you will see God. Rise up, you peacemakers, and you will be called children of God. Rise up, you who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness, and yours will be the kingdom of heaven. Rise up, do something, move. Amen.